Okay, we're looking at the quadratic equation. Shoot. Okay, so basically what we have is three methods for solving the quadratic equations. Okay, so far, quadratic equations are just like your ax squared plus bx plus c, which we've been talking about. Okay, so we can either factor them, which is the fastest method for ones that are easy to factor. We can graph them, which is accurate and good when using a table of values. Or we can do the quadratic formula. And this is useful when factoring and graphing are not practical. So if it's an unfactorable one, or when we've got just some, well, I'll show you some examples, but ones with decimals in them, for example, where they're tough to factor. Okay, so the quadratic formula, and you're going to want this, is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so when do we use the quadratic formula? Okay, so I was just mentioning that. That's when we get something that's unfactorable or just doesn't, it's hard to factor, things like that. Okay, so which method would you use to solve each of the quadratic equations and why? Well, on this one you'd probably just factor, because we have x and we have plus and minus, and it'd be plus 9 minus 4. Okay, so that's pretty easy. This one we'd have to do the quadratic formula because this is unfactorable. Okay, so we would do the quadratic. And this one, because there's awful numbers in that one, we would do the quadratic formula as well. Okay, so what the quadratic formula does is helps us get our two x-intercepts. So in this case, if we set this equal to 0, well then my x-intercept would be negative 9, 0, and 4, 0. The quadratic formula also does that. Okay, so let me show you an example of that. All right, so first we need to know A, B, and C. Well, A is 2, B is 1, and C is negative 25, just like we used before. Okay, so then we do the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Okay, so the opposite of B, opposite of 1 is negative 1. Okay, b squared, well 1 squared is just 1, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to simplify this. Okay, so you could use a calculator to do that. But basically we've got 4 times 2 is 8, times 25 is 200. Okay, plus your 1, so it's the square root of 201. So negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 201 all over 4. Now we're going to split it, okay, like we did before. We're splitting it because it's plus or minus. So it's negative 1 plus the square root of 201 over 4, or it's negative 1 minus the square root of 201 over 4. All right, so we're definitely going to want our calculator for that one. All right. Okay, so in your calculator, you can make the calculator do it all itself. Okay, so if we get this on here, let's see. We want negative 1 plus the square root of 201, and then we want to hit equals and divide that by 4. Okay, so there's my one answer. It's about 3.29. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to do negative 1 minus the square root of 201, and then we'll divide that by 4. So we get about negative 3.79. So what that's saying is if we were to graph that it crosses 1, 2, 3, 4, crosses at about there and about there. Okay, so we're just finding the x-intercepts but in a different way. Okay, let's try another one. So in this one, we'd identify our A, B, and C. So A is 0.05, B is 1, and C is negative 60. Okay, so opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So opposite of B is negative 1. B squared, 1 times 1 is just 1, minus 4 times 0.05 times negative 60 all over 2 times 0.05, 2A. Alright, so let's simplify that square root part. Okay, oops. And let's simplify that bottom too. So plus or minus. So 1 minus 4 times 0.05 times negative 60. And I get 13. Okay, so then we split it. So we either have negative 1 plus the square root of 13 over 0.1, or we have negative 1 minus the square root of 13 all over 0.1. So then we just put her in the calculator again. Alright, I'll show you again what I'm doing. I got negative 1 plus the square root of 13. Divide that by 0.1. Gets me about 26.06. And then we'll do the same thing, but we'll do negative 1 minus the square root of 13 and divide that by 0.1. So about negative 46.06. Okay, so that would be a fun one to graph. Really? Alright, so on this one, tell me what, okay, this one looks factorable. Let's try it. X minus 4, 5, set it equal to 0, split it. So x minus 4 equals 0, add 4. So one of my x-intercepts is 4. And the other x-intercept is 5. Okay, so that one I would do factoring. Now if you didn't see that it factored, you could have done the quadratic. So let's do our last one on this one as the quadratic. Alright, so I do x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, well that's a neat c, alright. Get rid of that. And let's see, so I want, well let's identify our a, b, and c. A is 1, b is negative 9, and c is 20. So, opposite of b, opposite of negative 9 is 9. B squared would be 81 minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, and let's go back here. So, 9 plus or minus, and that's all over 2. So let's simplify this. Well, 4 times 20 is 80. 81 minus 80 is 1. Well, what's the square root of 1? Just 1. Okay, so here's the splitting again. So I got 9 plus 1 divided by 2 and 9 minus 1 divided by 2. Well, we don't really have to put that in the calculator. 9 plus 1 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 divided by 2 gets me 4, which was the same answers we just did by factoring. Okay, so if you didn't see the factoring, this will work every time. Okay, and those are a lot nicer answers as well. Okay, let's just stop there. I think that's enough, and you'll get better at it, and you actually will end up memorizing that.